Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Mark Marex, Senior Index Specialist with Nasdaq Index Research. We're going to take a look at the Nasdaq Biotech Index. Mark, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thanks, Jill. Great to be back.
All right, let's talk about biotech in the age of COVID before we get into the index.
Sure. So, I mean, this index, the Nasdaq Biotech Index is so topical for obviously many reasons. Let's start with COVID being the most prominent. I've got a kind of mark to market here in terms of all the different vaccines that are in the pipeline currently per the New York Times. This is from a couple of weeks ago. And what I've highlighted here is Moderna and BioNTech. Those are two constituents in the Nasdaq Biotech Index. Moderna's in the top 10 holdings. BioNTech is in the top 20. Those, of course, are responsible for the two most effective COVID vaccines on the market currently. In terms of the mRNA vaccines, you've got other players that we'll talk about that are also part of this index that are working on vaccines or already on the market. But these are the key ones, and I'll get into in a little bit why it's so crucial that we have BioNTech in this index and not other indexes.
What does the composition of the index look like?
Sure. So the index isn't all that concentrated. It's got a modified market cap weighting approach to it where top 5 names get capped at 8%. The rest get capped at 4%. So you've got the top 10 represent about 50% of the index, and that's spread out across 274 companies. It's really grown by a lot. We were only at about 100 companies back in 2010, only about 200 companies a year ago. But it's a testament to just how much that industry, that space has grown. A lot of the growth happening with IPOs and kind of smaller cap names, finding a lot of success over the past couple of years, ballooning that index up to close to 300 names. You can see on the top here, names like Amgen, Gilead, Vertex, and Illumina round out the top 5, along with Moderna, which is number 3. And then kind of continuing that COVID theme, you've got Regeneron at number 6. They've been active in kind of developing these kind of novel monoclonal, polyclonal antibody treatments for COVID. You've got AstraZeneca there at number 10. That's a UK company. Not the most effective vaccine, but a pretty easy one to manufacture, transport, and store. That one's going to be really key in getting sort of the rest of the world, the developing world, vaccinated from COVID-19 over the next year or two as well.
All right, when we take a look at the third slide here, you're talking about globality. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so as I alluded to, this index, it's not a U.S. index. You look at other biotech indexes like the S&P Select Sector Index for biotech, where you've got the SPDR ETF tracking that. That's a U.S.-only index. It's U.S. companies. This index is exchange-based, right? It's based on companies in the space, biotech or pharmaceuticals that list on the Nasdaq exchange. That means like BioNTech, you can be a German company. You can have your primary listing in Europe, and you can have an ADR, a secondary listing on the Nasdaq exchange here in the U.S. And if you're big enough, if you're liquid enough, you'll make it into this index. So giving you a bit of that global exposure and giving you names, like BioNTech, like AstraZeneca. Sanofi's another one, a big French pharmaceutical company, where you just don't get that exposure with other U.S. biotech indexes because it's restricted by geography, not by exchange. The main takeaway on this slide, really, really crucial for viewers to understand, is that split in the middle between biotech and pharmaceuticals. It's not obvious at first why that's so special. But again, looking at something like the S&P or like the ICE Biotech Index, where they look at only one subsector of biotech, they exclude pharmaceuticals, you really miss out on a lot of key players that are kind of straddling both subsectors. You take a look at a name like Amgen, which is the biggest name in this index. It was reclassified from biotech to pharmaceuticals just this year. So using another approach of an index where you're looking at an industry classification, you would have kicked out Amgen in your index. It stays in this index because we consider both biotech and pharmaceuticals as long as they're listed on the Nasdaq exchange.
Right. And Mark, what I like with the fourth slide that you can see here truly is representative of the diversification that you were talking about before.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so interesting learning about this space. I mean, again, you look at the distribution of companies here in terms of where they're concentrating their efforts. You've got a ton that are really specialized in oncology, right? Cancer treatments, whether that's things like immunotherapy, novel forms of chemotherapy, gene therapies, all sorts of kind of, other specialized disease areas. And again, you dig into what these companies are doing on a R&D level, right? In terms of developing and then manufacturing and distributing all these various different therapeutics, some in pill form, some in, shot form, some in literally gene editing form. You start to get a sense of how unique this space is. Again, I can't stress enough that the special nature of this index, because it's Nasdaq exchange listed, you get some of those pharmaceutical companies that are listed on Nasdaq. They're not the big old name pharmaceuticals like Johnson & Johnson, where you've got a, baby product business mixed in there with shampoo and baby powder and bandages. And then you've got some pharmaceuticals mixed in. For the most part, the pharmaceuticals that listed with Nasdaq, they tend to be younger. They tend to be more, they have more biotech DNA, so to speak, within them in terms of, like Amgen, they maybe started out as a specialty biotech, and they've grown and been really successful, and they've now matured into sort of a full-fledged pharmaceutical company.
And Mark, to wrap up here in the last minute, let's talk about the ETFs and the growth of assets under management.
Yeah, so you can see it's a really clear story on this chart. AUM in the space of ETFs tracking this index has almost doubled since the lows in March 2020. Not a surprise, with good performance combined with just consistent inflows from investors across not just the U.S. ETP universe, but globally. There's a number of products listed outside the U.S. And then inside the U.S., we've got the newest one that just launched this past Friday from our friends at Invesco, the Invesco Biotechnology ETF, ticker IBBQ, also listed on the Nasdaq exchange. That product debuted with a little over 50 million in AUM already. And again, really entering the space, I think, at a point in time where you can see AUM is still near an all-time high. Investors recognize it's not a passing fad. It's an important theme that you're going to want exposure to in the years to come as we continue to fight COVID-19. And as we see really biotech start to, step in and address a lot of these other kind of health issues that we've been dealing with for years and years, that we're finally kind of finding some new answers to. So very important space to track. And again, we have all the data to back up here at Nasdaq to say that it really is the true benchmark to track the space, the Nasdaq Biotech Index.
All right, Mark, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.